Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back. I've been hands-on with Chrono Gear Warden of Time's new update 1.020, and I want to walk you through what it actually changes and why it matters for your runs, your proud clears, and your general sanity when the frame rate dips. Before anything else, a quick heads up if you want to try it yourself. It's currently on the Steam testing branch, not the main branch, so you'll need to opt in via the Betas tab on Steam. That's right, click the game in your library, hit Properties, find Betas, and select Testing for new experimental builds. The developers posted this test build on November 7th, and the full patch notes landed November 9th, so this is fresh. If the community doesn't uncover any wild side effects, they'll promote it to the main branch soon after. Here's the vibe of the patch. It's a stability and fairness pass, with some precision changes for speedrunners, some quality of life improvements for story players, and a balancing sweep across several bosses, including endgame. If you've ever felt like the game punished you just for having a rough frame rate in certain set pieces, this one will feel like the devs reached into your PC and flipped the behave yourself switch. They specifically call out low FPS behavior in multiple levels: gliders, boats, tubular bells, even the spinning bars in Tower of Darkness. So if your machine or capture setup occasionally stutters, those janky moments should smooth out. It's not about giving free wins, it's about removing those why did that object desync when the frame dipped moments that can ruin a great attempt. Let's talk general fixes first, because they quietly clean up a bunch of small annoyances that stack up over a whole playthrough. The Kronii stack note pickup bug is gone, which means your notes should finally tally correctly. Dialogue boxes won't keep advancing under pause anymore, so you won't mash through a line by accident if you pause to breathe or swap scenes while streaming. Menu navigation shouldn't snap the cursor to the top left corner like it's possessed, and starting a new game actually resets the stats cleanly, which is great if you're testing routes or doing multiple files. Also, you can't instantly repause a cutscene right after skipping it before the fade finishes. The game won't fall into that limbo state anymore. These are the kind of polish items that don't stand out in a trailer, but make the entire session feel less brittle. For speedrunners, there are two standouts. One, they've tuned the auto-skip behavior so it's more consistent, which should save you from those runs where a cutscene skip acts differently than you expect. Two, certain boss fights now stop the timer the moment you land the final blow instead of waiting until the post-fight cutscene ends. That's huge because it trims non-interactive fluff out of your time and makes segments more action to action rather than action to cutscene to timer finally stopping. If you're doing ILs or comparing runs with different hardware, this reduces weird variance. It won't turn a bad fight into a WR, but it will make your data cleaner and your resets less soul-crushing. Kronii herself gets a small but impactful safety net: 1 second of invincibility at the start of a mission or a rewind. Think of it as a buffer against spawn into nonsense moments. You shouldn't be able to ladder grab underwater anymore, and they squashed a rare edge case where landing out of a drill dash didn't refresh things correctly. That last one's more niche. But if you've ever had a double jump fail to come back when it clearly should have, you'll feel this fix in your bones. Now the balance passes. 2 bosses got particular attention: Wrath of Nature and the Ancient Ones. On Proud, Wrath of Nature has a lot more health. That sounds like, oh great, more HP, but it's really about pacing and damage windows. If you were melting the encounter with an optimal route and crits lined up, this pushes you to engage with more of the mechanics and boss phases, rather than bulldozing through. The Ancient Ones saw several tweaks: slight reductions to opening hit damage and max HP, but then a big change that the boss takes much less damage during the black hole attack. In other words, you're not going to cheese a massive chunk of the fight by exploiting that phase anymore, especially on Proud, where they also beefed up the boss's health. The net effect is a fight that's less front-loaded in damage burst and more about sustained execution. KFP Stadium got a very specific tweak that made me smile, because it tells you the devs are paying attention to community challenge runs. They've dialed it so that on a custom setup of Proud plus 25% extra damage dealt, the fight goes from functionally impossible to extremely difficult. That's a careful phrase. They aren't making it easy. They're making it achievable with precise play. If you were doing that configuration for content or personal bragging rights and hit a brick wall, give it another try under this patch. It's still a mountain, but not an unclimbable one. Performance-sensitive level scripting is quietly the hero of this build. In Castle Road and Tower of Darkness, Mume gliders should move more smoothly when frames dip. In the maze, the boat platforms are less erratic under low frame rates. In Symphonic Gallery, the tubular bell pipes now eject you consistently even if your GPU hiccups. And in Tower of Darkness, they also smoothed the spinning bars that Bay interacts with, and even removed a pile of unused out-of-bounds objects that were still running scripts for no reason. That cleanup can translate to fewer spikes and a more consistent feel, which is gold for marathon sessions and for content capture where you're inevitably juggling overlays. browser windows, and recording software. There are a couple of nice world logic fixes too. The world tree's autumn leaf platforms now start moving when you land on them, not just when you brush them, so movement feels deliberate and a winter checkpoint flag issue is sorted. In Roboco Strikes Back, Claw Strike's hitboxes don't linger after RBC4 exits the form, which removes that invisible hazard frustration. They also fixed a projectile reflection quirk, where destroyed projectiles left behind reflection hitboxes. All of this just cleans up the mental map you need to keep in your head while platforming and fighting. The game state matches what you see. Endgame fans, we need to talk about 0 seconds to midnight. They've tuned the number and spawn speed of meteors in the second shackle phase to scale with difficulty. That means Calm and Brave feel less oppressive compared to Proud, where intensity is supposed to peak. Meteor explosion damage is slightly up, which forces respect without turning the arena into a minefield. On Calm and Brave, there's a longer delay after the tail stab before the boss attacks again during the first 2 shackle phases, which gives mid-tier players just a touch more room to breathe. They also made the rewind sequences a bit less unfair, only slightly, they emphasize, so the identity of the fight remains intact. The tail stab's hitbox deactivates shortly after impact now, and the red warning silhouette appears earlier before the very first stab, clarifying the telegraph without neutering the threat. Finally, they fixed an issue where sword projectiles could keep spawning for several seconds in the last shackle phase, which could ripple into chaos when you didn't do anything wrong. The overall result is a climax that stays tense and demanding, but signals better and respects your inputs more. One small but smart flow change sits in steel on steel. If you've already cleared that endgame fight, finishing the stage again brings you back to the Sanctum hub instead of hijacking you into the ending cinematic on repeat. For anyone practicing, grinding collectibles, or making guide content, that saves you from mashing through credits just to get back to work. It's the kind of tweak that screams quality of life. If you're planning a run under this patch, here's how I'd approach testing without wrecking your muscle memory. First, do a clean boot and run through a couple of performance suspect spots on your usual setup. Castle Road gliders, the maze boats, and Tower of Darkness's spinner section. Try to record and stream as you normally do, and note whether inputs and moving platforms feel locked to game logic instead of frame pacing. If you notice fewer desyncs but still hit a snag, try reproducing it with and without your overlays to see if the issue is truly gone or just masked. The dev notes specifically call out low FPS corrections, and if you're a creator, your machine is rarely sitting idle. This is where you'll feel the patch first. Second, jump into a couple of bosses where the timer behavior matters. Pick any fight that used to wait for a cutscene to relinquish control of the clock and see how your splits behave now that the timer stops on the final blow. If you keep comparison data, you might want to tag your splits with the patch so you don't mix pre- and post-change times. It's not that your older PB is invalid, but routing around cutscene tails is less important now, and that can shift which micro-optimizations matter. Third, test your Proud builds against Wrath of Nature and the Ancient Ones. With the extra health on Proud, Wrath of Nature becomes a test of steadiness. Make sure your resource cycle supports longer commitment without overly relying on a single perfect burst. The Ancient Ones, meanwhile, pushes you to respect the black hole phase, where damage is attenuated now. If your plan hinged on exploding that window, consider spreading damage across safer opportunities, and keep cooldowns for phases where the boss is truly vulnerable. You'll likely find that consistent execution beats risky greed, especially as the health totals climb. For folks attempting that spicy KFP Stadium challenge on Proud with extra damage, I recommend treating it like a brand new encounter. The change is subtle from the outside, but the feel can shift a lot when specific thresholds and invuln windows are involved. Enter with the mindset that it's fair, but still borderline, and build your plan around minimizing exposure to compounding mistakes. If you get it, it's going to look clean on video because that fight leaves very little room for panic corrections.